There are mornings when you wake up and the first thought isn't gratitude. It's the quiet whisper that you're not enough, not smart enough, talented enough, successful enough. You scroll through social media, watching highlight reels, and that familiar ache settles in your chest, the ache of mediocrity. But here's what no one tells you. The fear of mediocrity isn't about being average. It's about the terror of being seen as you truly are, flawed, human, still figuring it out. In a culture that convinced you your worth depends on achievements, you've been taught that mediocrity is the enemy of meaningful life, that ordinary is failure. But what if this fear of never being good enough is keeping you from experiencing the profound beauty of being human? What if your beautiful, messy ordinariness is exactly what the world needs? The fear shows up everywhere. Apologizing for your art before anyone sees it. Downplaying accomplishments while feeling they're never enough. Turning life into a constant audition for worthiness. Here's the paradox. Those who seem most extraordinary are often most terrified of their ordinariness. What if mediocrity isn't the opposite of greatness, but its foundation? I need to tell you about the moment I realized I had been performing my entire life instead of living it. I was 23, sitting in my childhood bedroom at 2 a.m., staring at a rejection email from a graduate program I had convinced myself would finally prove I was worthy of existing. The email was polite, professional, devastating. While your application shows promise, we regret to inform you. I remember the exact texture of that moment, the blue glow of my laptop screen, the way my chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped out of me, the sound of my parents sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware that their son was having an existential crisis over a piece of digital correspondence. But it wasn't really about the rejection. It was about what the rejection meant. That maybe I was exactly what I had always feared. Ordinary. You see, I had built my entire identity around being the smart one. In elementary school, I was the kid who finished tests first. In high school, I collected academic awards like trophies of my worth. In college, I chose the hardest classes, not because I loved the subjects, but because I needed to prove I belonged in rooms with people smarter than me. Every achievement was a temporary relief from the constant anxiety that someone would discover I was a fraud. That night, staring at the rejection, I realized something terrifying. I didn't actually know who I was beneath all the achieving. I had spent so many years performing excellence that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply exist without justification. The fear of mediocrity had turned me into a stranger to myself. The most heartbreaking part? I wasn't even enjoying my successes. Every A, every award, every moment of recognition felt hollow because it was never enough to quiet the voice that said, "But what have you done lately?" I was trapped in what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, constantly running toward the next achievement that would finally make me feel worthy, only to discover that the finish line kept moving. This fear of mediocrity isn't a personal failing, it's a predictable response to the way we're conditioned from birth. Psychologist Tim Cass's research on materialism and well-being reveals something profound. When children grow up in environments where love feels conditional on performance, they develop what he calls extrinsic motivation, the belief that their worth comes from external validation rather than internal satisfaction. Think about it. How many of us learned that love was something to be earned, that attention came through achievement, that being good meant being better than others? We absorbed these messages not through dramatic moments, but through 1,000 tiny interactions. The way our parents' faces lit up when we brought home good grades. The way teachers called on us when we had the right answers. The way we learned that being special meant being better, and being better meant never being enough. Dr. Brené Brown's research on shame and vulnerability adds another layer to this understanding. She discovered that perfectionism isn't about healthy achievement. It's a shield against shame. When we're terrified of being seen as ordinary, we develop what she calls armor to protect ourselves from the vulnerability of being human. We become performers in our own lives, constantly managing our image instead of living authentically. But here's where it gets really interesting. The fear of mediocrity is often rooted in what psychologists call conditional positive regard. As children, we learned that love and acceptance came with conditions. We had to be smart, talented, successful, special to deserve care. This creates what Dr. Alice Miller calls a false self, a carefully constructed persona designed to earn love, while our true self remains hidden and unvalidated. The cruel irony is that this fear of being ordinary often prevents us from developing genuine excellence. When we're constantly worried about how we appear to others, we can't take the risks necessary for real growth. We choose safe paths that guarantee mediocre success over uncertain paths that might lead to authentic fulfillment. We become so afraid of failing that we never truly try. Our culture has created what I call the mythology of specialness, the belief that every person must be extraordinary to matter. Social media has amplified this to an unbearable degree. We're constantly exposed to curated versions of other people's lives, creating what researchers call compare and despair syndrome. Everyone else seems to be living their best life while we're struggling with the mundane reality of existence. Consider how we talk about success in our society. We celebrate the outliers, the billionaires, the prodigies, the overnight sensations, while ignoring the beautiful ordinariness of most human experience. We've created a culture where being average feels like failure, where contentment is seen as settling, where the phrase "living an ordinary life" sounds like an insult. This mythology is particularly toxic because it's based on a mathematical impossibility. By definition, most people are average at most things. That's what average means. But we've somehow convinced ourselves that everyone should be exceptional, creating a collective anxiety that's literally impossible to resolve. The education system reinforces this from an early age. We rank children, grade them, sort them into categories of worth. We celebrate the valedictorians, while the kids who are simply doing their best fade into the background. We teach children that their value is measurable, comparable, conditional. Let me paint you a picture of how this fear typically begins. Imagine a 7-year-old child who brings home a drawing from school. They're proud of it. It's a house with a crooked chimney and a sun with too many rays. But it's theirs. They run to their parent, eyes shining with the pure joy of creation. Now imagine two different responses. In the first scenario, the parent looks up from their phone, glances at the drawing, and says, "That's nice, honey. Did you see what your sister made? Hers is hanging on the refrigerator." In the second scenario, the parent puts down what they're doing, really looks at the drawing, and says, "Tell me about this house. I love how you made the sun so bright." The child in the first scenario learns that their effort isn't enough. There's always someone doing better. They begin to internalize the message that love and attention are scarce resources that must be earned through superior performance. The child in the second scenario learns that their authentic expression has value, regardless of how it compares to others. Most of us experienced some version of the first scenario, not because our parents were cruel, but because they were often overwhelmed, distracted, or repeating patterns they learned in their own childhoods. They may have grown up in families where love felt conditional, where children were seen but not heard, where emotional needs were dismissed as weakness. These early experiences create what psychologists call core beliefs, fundamental assumptions about ourselves and the world that operate below conscious awareness. Beliefs like, I must be perfect to be loved, my worth depends on my achievements, or if I'm not special, I'm nothing. These beliefs become the invisible architecture of our adult lives, driving behaviors we don't fully understand. This fear of mediocrity shows up everywhere in our cultural narratives, often in ways we don't consciously recognize. Consider the film Whiplash, where a young drummer nearly destroys himself pursuing perfection under an abusive teacher. The movie is disturbing not because it's unrealistic, but because it's so familiar. How many of us have had our own version of that teacher, external or internal, pushing us toward an impossible standard? Or think about The Social Network, which tells the story of Facebook's creation. Beneath the surface narrative of entrepreneurial success lies a deeper story about a young man so terrified of being ordinary that he creates a platform that turns human connection into a performance of worth. The film captures something profound about how the fear of mediocrity can drive us to achieve extraordinary things while leaving us fundamentally disconnected from ourselves and others. Literature offers even more nuanced explorations of this theme. In The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath writes about the paralysis that comes from having too many possibilities and the terror of choosing wrong. Her protagonist feels like she's sitting under a bell jar, watching life happen around her while feeling trapped by her own expectations of what her life should be. These stories resonate because they reflect our own internal struggles. We see ourselves in characters who are driven by the need to prove their worth, who sacrifice authenticity for achievement, who discover that success doesn't cure the fundamental fear of not being enough. What's one moment in your life when you realized you were performing instead of living? Share your story below. Your vulnerability might help someone else feel less alone. The power of these cultural mirrors lies not just in recognition, but in the possibility they offer for different endings. When we see our struggles reflected in art, we begin to understand that our fear of mediocrity isn't a personal failing. It's a shared human experience that can be transformed through awareness, compassion, and the courage to choose authenticity over performance. Here's the truth that will either liberate you or make you uncomfortable. Excellence culture is a scam designed to keep you productive and compliant. The fear of mediocrity isn't a natural human instinct. It's a manufactured anxiety that serves systems that profit from your insecurity. Think about it. Who benefits when you believe you're not enough? The self-help industry that sells you courses promising to unlock your unlimited potential. The social media platforms that keep you scrolling, comparing, consuming. The employers who can underpay you because you're so grateful just to be chosen. The entire economy depends on your dissatisfaction with who you are right now. This realization hit me like a physical blow 3 years after that rejection letter. I was sitting in a coffee shop, watching a man at the next table frantically typing on his laptop, while simultaneously checking his phone and taking notes from a self-improvement podcast. His energy was manic, desperate. He looked exactly like I had felt for years, like someone running from himself. That's when I understood. The fear of mediocrity isn't about wanting to be better. It's about being terrified of being human. We've been conditioned to see our humanity, our need for rest, our emotional complexity, our learning curves, our ordinariness, as problems to be solved rather than experiences to be lived. But here's what changed everything for me. I started paying attention to the people I actually admired, not the ones I thought I should admire. The teacher who made every student feel seen. The friend who could sit with you in pain without trying to fix it. The neighbor who tended their garden with quiet devotion. The parent who showed up consistently, imperfectly, lovingly. None of these people were famous. None of them were, exceptional by cultural standards. But they were living with a depth and authenticity that all the high achievers I knew seemed to be missing. I realized that in my pursuit of being special, I had become incredibly ordinary, just another anxious person performing their worth instead of living their life. The truly extraordinary people weren't trying to be extraordinary. They were just being fully, unapologetically human. Here's the controversial truth. Embracing mediocrity is one of the most radical acts you can commit in a culture obsessed with optimization. When you stop trying to be special, you become available for the kind of deep, meaningful existence that actually matters. Let me be clear. I'm not talking about giving up or settling for less. I'm talking about something far more subversive, choosing to measure your life by internal metrics rather than external ones, choosing presence over productivity, choosing authenticity over achievement, choosing to be a whole human being rather than a human doing. This is revolutionary because it threatens the entire system that depends on your dissatisfaction. When you stop believing that your worth is conditional, you stop being so easy to manipulate. You stop buying things to fill the void. You stop accepting jobs that drain your soul. You stop performing relationships instead of living them. The sacred purpose of embracing mediocrity is that it returns you to yourself. It allows you to ask different questions. Instead of, "Am I good enough?" you ask, "Am I being true to myself?" Instead of, "How do I compare to others?" you ask, "What brings me alive?" Instead of, "What will people think?" you ask, "What does my heart need?" This shift is terrifying because it means giving up the fantasy that someday you'll achieve enough to finally feel worthy. It means accepting that you are worthy right now in your beautiful, flawed, still figuring it out humanity. It means trading the exhausting pursuit of specialness for the profound peace of belonging to yourself. The integration of this understanding doesn't happen overnight. It's a daily practice of choosing self-compassion over self-improvement, presence over performance, being over becoming. It's learning to find the extraordinary within the ordinary, not by making the ordinary special, but by recognizing that ordinary is already sacred. I started small. Instead of checking my phone first thing in the morning, I would lie in bed for 5 minutes, just feeling grateful to be alive. Instead of immediately critiquing my work, I would pause and acknowledge the effort I had put in. Instead of comparing my life to others on social media, I would notice 3 things in my actual environment that brought me joy. These tiny shifts created space for something I hadn't experienced in years. Contentment. Not the manic high of achievement, but the steady warmth of being at peace with who I was in that moment. I discovered that when I stopped trying to be impressive, I became more interesting. When I stopped performing confidence, I found actual courage. When I stopped chasing specialness, I found something far more valuable: authenticity. The practice of embracing mediocrity taught me to see my struggles differently. Instead of evidence of my inadequacy, they became proof of my humanity. Instead of problems to be solved, they became experiences to be lived. Instead of reasons for shame, they became opportunities for compassion. I learned to celebrate small victories: making a friend laugh, cooking a decent meal, having an honest conversation, finishing a project that no one would ever see but that mattered to me. These moments weren't Instagram-worthy, but they were life-worthy. They were the building blocks of a meaningful existence. So here's your permission slip, written by someone who spent decades believing it wasn't enough to simply exist. You don't have to be special to matter. You don't have to achieve greatness to deserve love. You don't have to optimize yourself into someone else's version of success to be worthy of taking up space on this planet. Your mediocrity is not a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's what makes you relatable, approachable, human. It's what allows you to connect with others in their struggles instead of intimidating them with your perfection. It's what gives you permission to rest, to make mistakes, to learn slowly, to be a beginner at things that matter to you. The fear of never being good enough has kept you from discovering something beautiful. You are already good enough, not because of what you've accomplished, but because you exist, not because of your potential, but because of your presence, not because you're special, but because you're human, and being human is the most extraordinary, ordinary thing there is. This doesn't mean giving up on growth or goals or dreams. It means pursuing them from a place of wholeness rather than emptiness. It means creating from joy rather than desperation. It means achieving things because they align with your values, not because they prove your worth. The people who will love you for who you really are, messy, imperfect, still figuring it out, those are your people. The ones who need you to be perfect were never really seeing you anyway. They were seeing their projection of what they thought you should be. Remember that morning I described at the beginning? The one where you wake up feeling not enough? That morning still comes sometimes. The difference is that now, when that familiar whisper starts, you're not smart enough, talented enough, successful enough. I have a different response. I don't try to argue with it or prove it wrong. I don't reach for my phone to distract myself or make a list of achievements to feel better. Instead, I take a breath and say, "Good morning, fear. I see you. You're trying to protect me from rejection and disappointment. Thank you for caring, but today I'm choosing to be human instead of perfect." And then I get up and live my beautifully mediocre life. I make coffee that's sometimes too strong and sometimes too weak. I work on projects that might fail. I have conversations that are sometimes awkward. I love people imperfectly. I show up as I am, not as I think I should be. This is the revolution. Choosing to be ordinary in a world that profits from your insecurity. Choosing to be enough in a culture that tells you you're not. Choosing to be human in a system that wants you to be a machine. Your mediocrity is not your limitation. It's your liberation. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. The most important truths usually do. The fear of never being good enough has been your companion for so long that letting it go might feel like losing a part of yourself. But what you're actually losing is the part that was never really you. The performer, the people pleaser, the person who believed their worth was conditional. What remains is infinitely more valuable. The real you, worthy of love, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Beautifully, perfectly, extraordinarily ordinary. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear about it. What would change in your life if you truly believed you were enough exactly as you are? Share your thoughts below, and let's start a conversation about the courage to be ordinary.